Phil from the Modern Family is one of the characters in the media, TV, and movies who is suspected to have ADHD because of the glaring symptoms that he is showing.
Listen to these symptoms of ADHD, easily distracted by irrelevant stimuli. Often impulsively abandons one task for another.
That's where I left those.
A tendency to act without regard to consequences, often at the expense of personal safety. Having accidents
Okay, you know
more
what? I think
often-
that's enough.
Kasama sa listahan si Jake Peralta of Brooklyn Nine-Nine, Maria from Sound of Music, and Dog from the movie Up. Pero meron din talagang mga characters na merong ADHD diagnosis. That includes Bart Simpson and Percy Jackson. And I can totally relate with them because yes, I am a content creator diagnosed with adult ADHD. Do I think there's a link between ADHD and creativity? I honestly do. Hello everyone, October is ADHD Awareness Month and my content is dedicated to educating people about ADHD. And I want to share how I relate this neurodevelopmental disorder to my creative pursuits. Ito, pinapanood nyo. Attention Deficit Hyperactivity Disorder is a maldevelopment of the brain, resulting to impaired executive function. If you look into the brains of people with ADHD, it's chronically under-aroused, hindi po sexual. There's a chemical imbalance at laging mababa ang aming dopamine level. Dopamine is a chemical messenger giving us the feeling of pleasure and reward. So if people with ADHD mababa ang dopamine levels and dopamine brings a sense of excitement, then people like me feel under-aroused and bored most of the time. So how do we get aroused? Again, hindi po sexual. By constantly finding sources of dopamine in our environment. And that is why people with ADHD are perceived to be hyperactive or inattentive. But the truth is, hinahanap lang namin ang dopamine na hindi kayang masupply ng utak namin consistently. And it is because of this cognitive condition that messes up our executive functions. So, for example, nagsasalita ako ngayon and the sense of excitement that this activity brings somehow is quite low. Wala akong enough dopamine na nakukuha dito sa pagsasalita ko. I might easily get distracted by something. Of course, that is scripted, but I wanted to demonstrate how it feels like. That is why the 3 common presentations of ADHD. 1, inattentive, which may look like wala kaming focus lagi. 2, hyperactive or impulsive, malikot, sabat ng sabat, restless ang katawan or restless ang takbo ng utak, or a combination of both. So, ano connect na to sa creativity? Well, currently, there is no concrete evidence showing the causality of ADHD to an increased creativity. But there are a lot of studies where there are shared observations between the manifestations of ADHD and common creative processes. Number 1, divergent thinking, or the ability to brainstorm and come up with different solutions to an existing problem or dilemma. Number 2, conceptual expansion, starting off with one idea and associating it with another idea, to another idea, to another idea, and this idea is associated to this one, and so on. Number 3 is overcoming previous knowledge constraints. This is where people with ADHD doesn't just settle for what is currently at hand. They will always be thinking outside the box, coming up with ideas with so much novelty and originality. We don't want to be bored. And these things that I said are really helpful in my writing and content creation process. 1, I can always come up with different angles or conclusions whenever I wanted to discuss a certain topic. 2, one idea always leads to a new one because I can associate it somehow to a different concept, but with a connection nonetheless. And lastly, I try to discover more creative ways of showcasing my said content. Writing lang ba? But that's boring. Maybe I could come up with a song. Maybe I could come up with poetry. Maybe a skit. Or maybe a combination of all of these things. With this, ADHD might appear such a gift. And I'd like to think that it is once you learn how to manage it properly. Because admittedly, it comes with a downside. And this is where my ADHD becomes a big problem in my life. So ganito, imagine niyo, because of one's natural disposition to have divergent thoughts, we end up overthinking and becoming crippled with so much anxiety because a lot of things are running in our head. A simple thought could cause us to hyperfixate on it. And because we're jumping from one idea to another, our thoughts are always running. And it is extremely difficult for us to focus to just one thing. Just to illustrate, nakikita niyo yung mga thumbnails sa some of my YouTube videos. Look at it closely. That's what it feels like when I'm reading a book or an article. Just merely reading one word, I could easily associate with other different ideas, with other words, and nakakalimutan ko na anong binabasa ko. Do you know how much focus it requires for me to just digest one article? I'm telling you, different ideas are popping off my head habang binabasa ko yung words. That's why before I thought I was suffering from dyslexia, pero I realized na hindi naman talaga. It was only when I got diagnosed with ADHD, it became clear. And lastly, because we're a sucker for novelty, we always seek something exciting, something more interesting to what we are currently doing. And we end up leaving and abandoning the tasks that we have on hand if it's no longer giving us the right dopamine or the rewarding feeling. Here's the important question. How do we fairly view ADHD? Is it a gift? Is it a problem? For my case, honestly, I thought I was mostly functional growing up, even if the manifestations of ADHD have brought a lot of restlessness and micro problems all throughout my life. But in reality, hindi ko namamalayan na I was unknowingly finding my own ways to cope with the symptoms of ADHD na hindi ko pa alam na ADHD pala talaga yun. If only I knew back then, maybe I wouldn't feel bad about being so forgetful, being so distracted, hyperfixating on many things. I could have handled it better. And that is why my life changed when I got myself diagnosed and sought professional help on my mid-20s. Because now I know how to work with my ADHD, not against it. So I now started discovering new methods and coping mechanisms on how to handle the symptoms of ADHD. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but at least the self-loathing part na hindi ako competent, na hindi ako maayos, hindi ako productive, dahan-dahan siyang nawawala because I am acknowledging that ADHD exists in me, but I have ways to handle and cope with it. And that's why I highly recommend that if you somehow relate to the things that I'm sharing, there's no harm in having yourself diagnosed. Pa rin pa if you can actually pinpoint what's causing all of this, and therefore the solution that you're going to arrive, hindi lang basta-basta naisip lang or nakita mo lang sa Google. These are things that a professional would highly recommend and for you to follow through. Now, before I completely overshare at magdagdag pa ako ng mga other ideas on this video, I will end it right here. And honestly, there are a lot of other related ideas in my head right now. Ito siya. Probably I'll discuss it in the near future. If you have specific topics that you're interested in, do let me know and I might prioritize it for my next videos. This is Andrew and this is my channel shared by Andrew Beso. Go check the comment section below. I shared some resources, some videos, some links that helped me on creating this video. You might find it useful. So do like, subscribe, and share this video. Go check out my other contents. Go check out my other platforms. You could see how a creative with ADHD is producing content. Have a nice day and good luck. Bye!